My name is Diana Parker. I'm 32 years old, and 3 weeks ago I stood in a grand ballroom filled with 150 people, my father's business partners, colleagues, and family friends, while my mother leaned into the microphone, smiled like she was delivering a harmless joke, and said, "At least Diana found a husband, even if we don't know what he does for a living." The room laughed, my father smiled, my sister smirked, and my husband, the man they had dismissed as a nobody for 4 years, slowly pushed back his chair and stood up. And what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about my family, my worth, and my life. I met Marcus 6 years ago in a crowded coffee shop after a long day of parent-teacher conferences, exhausted, desperate for caffeine, and craving silence. And he was sitting across from me, typing on his laptop with a quiet focus and a warm, gentle smile. And we barely spoke at first, but something about him felt safe, human, and real. And for 2 months, we shared that table. He told me he worked in education. I told him I taught third grade. And for the first time in my life, someone saw me as Diana, not as Robert Parker's disappointing daughter, not as Madison's shadow. And when he asked me to dinner, I said yes before he finished his sentence. And we dated for 2 years in simple ways: farmers markets, movie nights, quiet dinners in his modest apartment. And I fell in love with the way he listened, really listened, when I talked about my students, my dreams, and my fears. And when he proposed, I waited 3 weeks before telling my parents because I already knew how they would react. And they did exactly what I expected, my mother's voice dripping with disappointment as she asked what it meant that he worked in education, as if helping children learn was some kind of embarrassing hobby. And Marcus never pushed me to explain his job. He just said he wanted my family to like him for who he was, not what he had. And I didn't fully understand that until years later, when I realized my family measured worth in dollar signs, deals closed, and headlines printed. Every holiday dinner was the same. My sister, Madison, praised like a corporate goddess, while I was reduced to a footnote, my achievements ignored, my stories brushed aside, my career treated like a childish phase. And I remember inviting my parents to my students' school play, only to hear my father say he had real meetings, while he visited Madison's office a dozen times a year. And Madison once whispered that Dad was disappointed in me, that I had the same opportunities she did, and I wanted to scream that our opportunities were never the same, but I stayed silent because silence was easier than conflict. Then came the retirement party invitation, an email for me, a hand-delivered calligraphied card for Madison, and their mother told me we'd be seated at table 14 near the kitchen because important guests needed better seats. And she warned me not to talk too much about my little school because people there had real careers. And something inside me broke that night, but I still asked Marcus to come because I was tired of facing them alone, and he warned me he wouldn't stay quiet if they hurt me again. The ballroom was everything my father loved: crystal chandeliers, orchestras, designer gowns, and ego. And my mother greeted guests like royalty while directing us to the back corner, and Madison looked like a celebrity beside my father. And Jennifer Walsh, one of my father's biggest partners, kept staring at Marcus like she recognized him. And during my father's speech, he praised Madison as his legacy and then called me someone still trying to figure out what to do with my life. And the crowd laughed, and I felt humiliated in front of everyone. And then my mother delivered the joke about my husband being a mystery, and my father added that some people are meant to lead and others to support. And I realized they were publicly executing me emotionally. And then Marcus stood up. He walked toward the stage calmly while the room whispered, and he introduced himself as Diana's husband and said he had stayed quiet for 4 years, but he wouldn't anymore. And Madison mocked him, called him embarrassing, said he probably made less than her assistant, and laughed about him working in education. And then Marcus revealed his company, EduSpark, and the room froze as Jennifer Walsh announced they were valued at $200 million and featured on Forbes. And suddenly, everyone knew who he was, and my father and mother were stunned. And Marcus explained he had built an educational technology company that helped millions of children, and he revealed a $5 million grant to fund STEM programs at my school. And he said he built the company because of teachers like me. And for the first time in my life, someone stood in front of my family and said I mattered. I finally spoke and told my parents their behavior was wrong, whether Marcus was rich or poor, that respect shouldn't depend on money, and that I was done performing for their approval. And I walked out with Marcus while 150 people watched. And my parents' world started falling apart afterward. Deals collapsed, partners withdrew, reputations were damaged, and they tried calling, apologizing, pitching business opportunities, but I ignored most of it because I realized how conditional their love had been. My Uncle George called and told me he'd always been proud of me, and that family is about who shows up, and for the first time I felt seen. 3 weeks later, I met my parents at a coffee shop and told them I would give them a chance only if respect came first. And for the first time, they listened, not as investors or image managers, but as people who realized they had lost something precious. Sitting on my balcony that night with Marcus, watching the city lights, I realized I had spent my whole life chasing approval I never needed, that I had always mattered, and that my worth was never tied to their expectations, my sister's success, or my husband's bank account. And I finally understood that the people who love you don't make you prove your worth, they celebrate it. And for the first time in 32 years, I truly believed I was going to be okay.